South Korea's stock market has lost a third of its value in 25 days, which is faster than most diets fail and considerably more expensive. I am Lambert Woollingham, and this is the Daily Shear for Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. The humidity today is doing more damage than anything actually on the docket, which is saying something. Closer to home, Austin's public transit system is one rejected contract away from finding out what the city looks like without it. Austin's bus drivers have authorised a system-wide strike against Keolis, the private contractor that runs Capital Metro's day-to-day operations, after management rejected the union's contract proposal on July 14th. Amalgamated Transit Union Local, 1,091 members, testified at Monday's Transit Board meeting demanding real meal breaks, better safety training, and higher base pay. Union leadership says more than 75% of the current driving staff can no longer afford to live inside the city they drive through. Keolis maintains it is only allowed to negotiate within whatever financial limits Capital Metro sets, which is a tidy way of saying the actual decision makers are not at the table. A walkout would be Austin's first major transit strike since 2008 and would hit airport routes right as the University of Texas and the Austin School District start the fall semester. San Antonio's school districts are entering the new academic year with their books already underwater, and only 3 of the roughly dozen districts in the area expect to actually balance their budgets before classes start. The usual culprits are back. The federal pandemic relief money has run out, and declining enrollment keeps shrinking the state funding tied to it. The other 9 districts are covering the gap by draining emergency reserves, delaying campus maintenance, and eyeing staff compensation for the next round of cuts. Local property taxes are not covering the difference, which is leaving school boards to do the state legislature's math for it. Officials are warning that without intervention from Austin, the region could see structural school closures by 2028. The Texas Attorney General's office has opened an investigation into the makers of tampons and cosmetics, sending civil demands to Tampax, Kotex, L, and LOLA over whether they are misrepresenting the presence of heavy metals in their products. The probe follows a 2024 University of California study that found detectable lead, arsenic, and cadmium in more than 30 tampon products across 14 brands. State investigators are simultaneously scrutinizing cosmetics and lip balms marketed as clean or non-toxic, since lip tissue absorbs synthetic dyes and petroleum-based ingredients faster than the rest of the skin. The Attorney General says the resulting data will be used to penalize any company found concealing chemical hazards from consumers. For now, everything alleged remains exactly that. Alleged. Austin Bergstrom is getting a 20-mile underground pipeline to feed the airport jet fuel directly, cutting out more than 100 tanker trucks a day that currently rattle through Del Valle and other neighborhoods nearby. Refinery operator Richland Hills Resources is funding the entire 10-inch line, which will carry over 600,000 gallons of fuel daily once it is finished in 2027. The route runs mostly through existing state right-of-way, so there is no direct taxpayer money involved in building or maintaining it. It ties into a terminal expansion meant to handle 30 million passengers a year by 2037, which makes the current terminal look quaint by comparison. Neighbourhood groups that spent years fighting industrial pollution in the area have actually endorsed this one, which for Austin infrastructure counts as a minor miracle. On the money side of things, a Tarrant County suburb has decided the data centre boom needs office hours. North Richland Hills City Council voted unanimously to require special use permits for any new data centre, giving city staff the power to evaluate noise, water use, and strain on the electrical grid before construction starts. Cooling systems and backup generators now have to sit at least 100 feet from residential lots, fully enclosed or shielded. Routine generator testing is restricted to standard weekday business hours, presumably so residents' complaints arrive on a schedule the city can manage. The council acted after a resident survey found widespread anxiety about grid stability and how little tax revenue the facilities actually generate relative to what they consume. North Richland Hills joins a growing list of Texas cities trying to build legal fences around the data center boom before it builds around them. Newly released diary entries from Anthony Fauci show that as early as January 2020, he had privately concluded the Wuhan wet market was not the source of COVID-19, and that the outbreak actually started earlier with the market serving only as an amplifier. Senator Rand Paul released the excerpts over the weekend. For the following 2 years, Fauci continued to publicly maintain that the market was the likely source through natural animal spillover, which is a different story than the one in his own notebook. The same records confirm that a February 2020 conference call among officials discussed the possibility of a deliberate lab origin before the theory was officially set aside. The release has reopened congressional scrutiny into how transparent the government was during the outbreak's opening weeks. Johnson & Johnson has offered up to $5.5 billion to settle roughly 76,000 lawsuits alleging its talc baby powder caused ovarian cancer, covering nearly all the remaining litigation over the discontinued product. The company still insists the claims are meritless, which is the standard position of a company writing a check this size. The deal needs sign-off from 95% of plaintiffs' attorneys, and if it clears that bar, the first $3 billion goes out next year, with the rest not due until after 2028. Johnson & Johnson spun its consumer health division into a separate company back in 2022, a maneuver that happened to keep most of this liability off its main balance sheet. President Trump used a General Motors testing facility in Michigan to defend his tariff program, telling autoworkers that a 25% levy on foreign vehicles is the only reason their factories are still running. The visit came days after the administration imposed new tariffs of 10 to 12.5% on goods from more than 80 countries, replacing an earlier global tariff the Supreme Court had struck down. Automotive executives have repeatedly warned that these trade barriers raise their own costs and get passed straight to car buyers. None of that made it into the speech, where the tariffs were presented as the sole reason Michigan still has an auto industry at all. South Korea's KOSPI index dropped 10.8% on Tuesday, tripping circuit breakers as investors dumped semiconductor stocks, and the index has now lost a third of its value since its mid-June peak. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix both posted double-digit single-day losses, with analysts pointing to growing doubt over whether all the spending on artificial intelligence infrastructure will ever pay for itself. The panic accelerated overnight after reports that China has begun mass-producing its own deep ultraviolet lithography machines, threatening the Western monopoly on the tools used to make advanced chips. Japan's Nikkei closed nearly 4% lower in sympathy, and Western markets were bracing for a rough opening as the optimism around limitless artificial intelligence hardware growth started to run out of runway, the sort of session that will get its own chapter over at Wolf Street. Beyond the state line, a funeral in Washington has turned into the week's most attended diplomatic summit. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington to meet with President Trump and attend Senator Lindsey Graham's congressional funeral their first face-to-face since the United States and Israel launched joint operations against Iran back in February. Netanyahu is trying to lock down continued military commitments and paper over public disagreements about a permanent ceasefire, while also running his own re-election campaign back home. He has reportedly been sidelined in recent weeks, while the White House quietly pursued its own settlement with Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is also expected at the funeral and is scheduled to meet with the administration about pending sanctions. A funeral, it turns out, is where several ongoing wars are currently being managed. The fight over the administration's mail-in voting order has moved up a level, with the Justice Department filing an emergency appeal asking the Supreme Court to revive the policy after an appeals court upheld the block against it. 23 states sued to stop the order, which would require a centralized federal citizenship list and instruct the Postal Service to deliver ballots only to people verified on it. State election officials argue the Constitution puts election administration in their hands, not Washington's. Democratic attorneys general warn that rolling out an untested verification system months before the midterms risks disenfranchising legitimate voters and throwing local precincts into chaos. The administration, for its part, describes the order as mere policy guidance, which is an interesting way to characterize a national ballot verification registry. A federal judge blocked Minnesota's ban on political prediction markets just days before it was set to take effect, ruling that Polymarket and Kalshi are likely to win their argument that federal law preempts the state's move. Judge Catherine Menendez found that the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has exclusive authority over event contracts traded on federally registered exchanges, not individual states. The injunction keeps both platforms running while the underlying lawsuit plays out. The CFTC itself backed the platforms in court, warning that letting states regulate these markets piecemeal would fracture what is supposed to be a single national trading system. The ruling means the exchanges can keep listing contracts on the midterms, while Minnesota's ban sits on hold. Former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is sitting out South Dakota's first ever Republican runoff for governor, a race happening in what used to be her own backyard. She was ousted from the Trump administration earlier this year, and her once dominant grip on the state party has apparently gone with her. The runoff pits incumbent Governor Larry Roden against outsider challenger Toby Doden, and Noem has declined to endorse either one or bring in her national fundraising list. Her silence reads less like neutrality and more like a full withdrawal from South Dakota politics. The race has turned into a proxy fight between whatever factions are left to divide up the territory she used to run. Congressman Jamie Raskin has opened an investigation into FIFA President Gianni Infantino's financial relationship with Donald Trump, demanding the organization turn over records of any gifts, payments, or benefits given to the president or his family business. The letter specifically asks for visitor logs from the FIFA office space inside Trump Tower, which the organization acquired last year. Raskin also wants Infantino to sit for a transcribed interview about the Federation's private dealings with the administration. The underlying question is whether FIFA offered incentives to secure favourable federal treatment ahead of next year's World Cup, which the United States is hosting. FIFA has not yet responded to the request, which itself is a kind of answer. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake hit Japan's Kumamoto prefecture on Tuesday, and the Japan Meteorological Agency issued tsunami advisories for the Ariake and Yatsushiro coastal areas soon after. The quake struck at a shallow depth of about 6 miles, producing violent shaking across the entire island of Kyushu and communication networks in the mountainous region remain only partially functional as authorities check for landslides. No catastrophic damage to major public facilities or transportation infrastructure has been reported so far. Aftershocks are continuing to hit the coastal towns, and the government has ordered residents in the inundation zones to stay on high ground until the tidal surges pass. North Richland Hills has decided that backup generators may only be tested on weekdays during business hours, presumably so residents' outrage arrives on a predictable schedule. I assume the next ordinance restricts server failures to the same window, followed by a stipulation that the power grid itself is only permitted to go down Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with an hour for lunch. Eventually, the only thing left unregulated in North Richland Hills will be the actual electricity, which will presumably keep whatever hours it likes out of sheer spite. The new Austin-Bergstrom pipeline runs entirely underground for 20 miles, which is more forethought than most people put into where their gasoline comes from at all. That covers the rundown, and I am going to go stand in a barrier zone 100 feet from the nearest generator, which sounds more peaceful by the minute. Lambert Woollingham, out. The day has been shorn. Until tomorrow.